Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the product design in Blender series. In today's video, we will be doing the texturing of this 3D model. Hopefully you followed along with the part 1 video, which covered the modeling of this design. But if you want to start from here, I have the full starting Blender scene available for free on my Patreon, so you can download it and get started on this texturing practice. I hope you enjoyed the second part, and with that, let's get started. Okay, let's get started with the texturing of this model. I'm going to kind of set up my Blender scene to what I usually do for shading. So I'm going to bring out from the bottom right hand corner and then also bring out from here. I'm also going to turn on screencast keys. There we go. So I'm going to use this as my rendered view. I'm going to be rendering in cycles, so I'm just going to go Z, go up to rendered, and then I've got the world strength turned down to 0.1, and I'm also going to set in the scene tab, go to film, click transparent. I don't want to really see the background in this view. So what we need is some good lighting in this view so that we can see that while we're texturing. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to Shift A, add in a light area. Just going to go into front view, bring that up. I'm just going to go with the back right for now. I'm basically just going to angle this to the keyboard. Try to get some nice shadows and just some contrast going. It's a little bit dark. I'm going to bring this about like that. I'm going to move it away from the model a little bit. And then I'm going to set the brightness to, let's try 400. It's a little bright. Let's go to 50. That looks pretty good. And then we've got these contrast or like these very strong shadows over here. So I'm just going to duplicate this light and rotate it around. And then I'm going to drop the power to about 100. And then I'm going to go in the front view, just kind of bring that into here. I don't really want to see shadows going two ways, so let's try just increasing the size on this, kind of give us some fill light. Okay, that looks pretty good. That's enough light on here. We can see what we're doing. I'm going to hit T to hide this bar right here. Then I'm also going to go in and hide these two to where we kind of get just a good rendered view. And then I'm going to go up here, click the little drop down, hit S, and then this is going to be our shader editor. All right, so we are all set up to start shading. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to shade this outer molding piece right here. To shade this model, we're going to be using procedural materials. If you're going for ultra photorealism, I do recommend using PBR image-based materials, but because of the simplicity of the model that we're doing, it's very simple colors and stuff like that, so we're just going to use procedural materials. So we're going to create our first one, which is this metallic outside. So I'm going to go up in the shader editor, click new. I'm going to bring this over, make it easier for you guys to see. But we're going to use the Node Wrangler add-on, go Control T, and then what we really want is we want something to drive kind of this powdery look of this metal. So we're going to get rid of the image texture, Shift A, and then search for a noise texture. And then we're going to plug the vector into the vector, and then we're going to bring all this over. So the first thing we need to do is we need to scale this to where it looks like it would work for our metal. So I'm just going to plug this factor into the base color. And you can see here that it's basically all the same color. There's nothing really changing. And the reason for that is we're using the UVs. We're not even going to deal with UVs on this out piece. We're just going to change it to the object. So now you can see that there's some type of pattern going on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase this scale to around 1,000. And then it's hard to see right now, but if we bring it back, you can see that you're starting to get this powdery texture here. So let's just leave it at 650 for now, and we'll go back up if we need to. So we want to control what this looks like. So a good way to do that is to Shift A and then put in a color ramp in between the noise texture output and here. And then one thing that I was messing around with I want to do is I want to swap these two. That's going to help give it some speckled texture. And then we're going to crank this down a little bit. And then I'm also just going to drop this color to where it's not so black. So we're going to do something that looks kind of like that. And then from back here, it looks pretty good. You can bring this back and forth to adjust how much dark you want in your scene. This looks pretty good to me. Okay, but now we basically just have a flat color. We don't have any texture on the model, so we're going to need some bump, some normal displacement. So we're going to come over here. We're going to take the same noise texture so that we're getting the same pattern. I'm going to drag it out into a color ramp. That way we can just control it same as the other one. And then from the color ramp, we need something to plug into the normal, but you can't plug in the color ramp directly. So we're just going to take this color out, and you need to add it to a bump height node, and then plug that normal into the normal. So So now if you zoom in here, you can see that we've got some type of texture going on. This looks really nice for a procedural metal, you know, sandblasted kind of look. But the strength is typically a little too high, so we're going to drop this down to about 0.3 for now. We don't want it to be so strong that it's unrealistic. And that's basically it. The only thing that we can also change would be the roughness. If you want it to appear like it's got a glossy, you can bring that roughness down. But realistically, for this type of material, I would leave it around 0.4, just enough to give it some sheen when the light hits it. But this is a very good base setup. You can also increase the scale. If you don't want it to look so rough, you can increase it to like 1,000. And that's going to help it appear more like a fine brushed metal texture. But this looks pretty good for now. You can see that you've got nice highlights here from your light, and that's basically the outside metal shading. All right, now that we've finished that, we're going to move on to texturing and shading these tabs. So looking at the reference images, they're basically just a rough plasticky material, so we can do that very easily with procedural materials too. So I'm going to select one of these keys, and then I'm going to do a new material. And actually, let's go back and click on the outside one. Let's rename this to our metal housing, just so we can stay organized. So now we're going to go to this key. We're going to set up a new material. We're going to do the exact same trick. Control T, get rid of the image texture. Shift A, noise texture. Drop that in. Vector to vector. Change the UV input to be the object input. Plug that factor. But actually, we're going to leave the color the same. I don't want to even affect the color. We're just going to use one base color for the plastic. We're going to take this, same as the other one, factor into a bump height node, and then normal into normal. So now you can see this one goes absolutely crazy. The scale is way too low, so we're just going to drag that way up. I'm going to do something around 500. That's still a little bit too big for me, so let's go 750. That looks pretty good. Also, you have to remember that this strength is always really high, so like 0.2 or usually is pretty good. I don't know how easy that is to see in the YouTube video, but that looks pretty good to me. I'm actually going to drop that just a little bit more and go to 0.1. Oh yeah, that looks good. And then, just the same as the other one, the things that we can change would be the base color and the roughness. 0.5 looks pretty good. I might actually drop that to 0.3 or so, just because I want to be able to get a little bit of highlights on there. It's going to look good. And then also from the reference image, you don't want everything to be just white. I'm going to give this the slightest amount of coloring. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag this into the orange or yellowish kind of color. And then I'm just going to reduce this saturation down to something like 0.1, just so we get a little bit away from the base white of the color. Okay, now we've got this rough plasticky setup. We're just going to copy this material. A really good way to do that is just to select all the objects that you want to have the same material. And this is great when we use procedural because we don't have to worry about UVs. So we're just going to do this one last, and then if you do Control L, you can do link materials, and that's going to apply, you can see how they're a little bit different color. That's going to apply the same material to all of these. So now we've got the metal housing finished. We've got this setup of keys here. We're going to move on to these pieces. So I want to look at the reference image real quick. I'm going to click this top button and click I to go in Image Editor. I've already got the top view downloaded from the Teenage Engineering website. I can see that this color is a little bit off. We'll go back and adjust this at the very end when we're using the reference image, but these tabs right here have the exact same plastic, and then they just have this black material here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up these tabs to do that same thing. So we're going to go back into the shader editor. On these pieces, we're going to select them all, and then click this one last, and we're going to do the same thing, Control L, link materials. So now these all have the same base plastic color. Also, this image is looking a little dark, so I'm going to come up here to this and change my light to around 400. So now all these tabs already have this rough white plastic applied, but what we need is another texture or another material to apply to them. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go over here to the first one, and we're going to click plus, and that's going to create a new material slot. So in our shader editor window, we're just going to click new. Now we're going to make a very simple plastic material. We're just going to drop the color to black. We can do the same texture as we did before. Control T, delete, Shift A, noise texture, drop it in, vector, object, factor into a bump height node. I'm going to bring all this out, put that into here. Okay. Now, what we have to do is we have to tell it which parts of the keys are going to be using this rough plastic and which parts are going to be using this material. Let's just call this our black plastic material. So if we click on this guy and we go into tab, what I want you to do is click 3 on your keyboard, go into face select, and then the C, if you click the C key, it pulls up your brush tool or your kind of selection tool. In face select, I'm just going to click in the center and then right click. And then if you go control and then the plus key on your number pad, I'm just going to grow this selection out. And then all you have to do is make sure that you're on the black plastic tab and click assign. So now you can see that's dropped it in. It's getting very weird results because of this scale. So let's set this to something like 500. Just to give it some nice texture, we're going to drop this down to 0.1 or so. And then the roughness, you can play around with this. I like having this probably around 0.2. That's going to be where if you look, you get some highlight. You can have a little bit of stuff there, but you might want to have it something kind of like that. 0.365 is what I have that set on right now. Okay. So now what we need to do is we need to do the exact same thing for all of these other materials. So we've changed this setup. So I'm going to grab all of these keys again and then Control L, link materials. So now if you click on each of these keys, it has both material slots in there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click on, I'm going to click on similar keys first because the geometry might be a little bit different, but I'm basically going to click all of these tabs that have the same shape. And then I'm going to bring this out so you can see a little better. Tab. And then I'm going to do C again. And then I'm just going to grab the middle point of each of these. And then right click to get out of it, but then don't lose it. So click again in the middle of these two, right click. Okay, now that I have all the same faces of each of these pieces, I'm going to do control and then plus on the numpad, come out to that edge, and then we just click black plastic and assign. And now we've got the black pieces on each of these. We're going to do the exact same thing on these little small middle tab. Oop, not that one. Is that all of them? Oop, I missed one right here. Tab, C, control plus, assign. Oop, assign the wrong thing. Assign black plastic. And then we're going to grab this guy, this guy. Those are the last two. So tab, C. Oop, these are a little bit harder to do. So C, grab the middle. C, grab the middle. Control, plus, 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 plus. Let's go one more. And then assign the rough black plastic. Now, these keys are going to be a little bit different because we need to be able to apply those things onto them, so like the different icons and buttons and stuff like that. And a good way to do that is to use a sticker sheet method. I learned this from Derek Elliott. I'll link a video to his in the comments or in the description so that you can see where I learned this from. But what we're basically going to do is we're going to use the UVs to be a mask between two different materials. And so what I did was I created this sticker sheet in Canva. I'll just put it on the screen now. I basically just imported the top view of this keyboard into Canva and then used free icons and numbers and overlaid them on top so that I could have this black and white background image. And then I also in Canva added some blur just to give it a little bit of softness on the edges. That helps Blender to calculate the normals better when it's trying to round off the edges of the icon or not just be black and white. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new shader for all of these tabs, and then we're going to use the UVs projected from the top and then overlay our black and white image mask to go between two different materials. So I'm going to change this back to the shader editor. I'm just going to click on one of these and then click new, and then we're going to call this one the icon key material. And so what we're going to need is we're going to need basically two materials. So I'm going to pull this principled BS. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to pull this principled BSDF down, Shift D. We're going to bring it up. Between the two materials, we're going to need to mix them. So Shift A and then mix shader. We're going to drop that in to here, drop that into here. So now basically what we need is we need some way to control the mix between the two. So what I'm going to do is drag this out and then search for image texture. So now I'm going to use as the factor here the blurred image that I made from Canva. It was in my downloads. So what that's going to basically do is be the factor that determines if we're using this one on top or if we're using this one on bottom. And because it's black and white, white means that we're going to fully use this one, and then black means that we're going to use this one. And if I get it mixed up, we'll just change the colors around here. Now we should be able to, if we change one of these colors, we should start seeing some stuff happening. You can see that there's all these random colors and stuff going on here. So to do this right, what we're going to do is now that we've got this set up as a base color, I'm going to select all of these keys that have stuff on them. And a good way to do that is to use C and just drag over all the things that you want to collect, but I'm not going to collect the one that we've already done so far. And then I right click, shift click that guy, Control L, link materials. So now you can see these are all black. It's got, if we change this color, it's only affecting the part that's not where the text is. You can see that there's numbers here. So if I change this color to anything I want, it doesn't change the color of the texture. I know that I want the text to be black, so we're going to change this out. We're going to make these white and this black. So now if you zoom in, you can see that we have something going on where there's some type of text, but basically the UVs need to be set up to where the icon is going to appear in the middle. So what we're going to do first is we're going to tab into edit mode and then go to the right hand view, and then we're going to go Alt Z to go into X-ray. And basically what I want is I just want to select the top. So I'm going to box select over the top right here and just get that top face or so. And then I'm going to Control I and select everything else. Now we're going to go over here into the UV editor, and then we're basically going to take those UVs and we're going to scale everything down and put it into the white. That way there's nothing on this outside rim or any other pieces that are showing those materials. So then what we need to do is go Control I in this view, and that's going to give us just those top faces of everything. And then we're going to click U, project from view. And so now we're going to have these all set up. And because we use the reference images, we can just go A, scale everything. This is a little bit hard to do this way, but what we're basically going to do is just bring them over, and then we need to scale them up and down until they fit. So I can tell that I need to scale this down a little bit. GX, bring it over. I'm using this circle in the middle because this is a good way to see if I'm in the point here, and then I need to scale it down because like right now you can tell that it's a little bit offset, like it's coming a little bit further to the left. So I'm going to scale this down a little bit more. GX. Just try to center this up. It's a little bit too much. We're going to scale it up a little bit more. Place it over the top. And bam, you can see we've got all the icons already applied. And what's really cool about this is if we go back to our image editor, you can see that like a texture like this, for example, has a color. All we have to do is go back over to here. I'm going to get out of Alt Z, select this one. On the material, click this icon to basically say don't use the same material as all the other ones. And now we can go back to our shader editor, and instead of being black, we can just set this to any color we want that icon to be. So this is a really good way to use the technique of applying a bunch of textures or icons to it. Okay, but we do want to dress this up even a little bit more. So what we're going to do is, if you got in here and looked, this is basically just a flat color. There's nothing going on. So we need some bump to make a little bit of a raise. So what I want to actually do is I want to copy this setup from these plastics over to this. So I'm going to delete this principled BSDF right here. And then I'm going to go back to the rough white plastic. I'm going to grab all of these coordinates or all of these nodes and then Control C. And then I'm going to go back to this icon key material. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this principled BSDF, Control V, and then hook this into this spot. So now you can see if you zoom in, you've got that rough plastic on these, which is perfect. So basically for this text, we don't need this rough plastic bump, but we do want it to kind of have a raised feature, just like it would be if it was kind of printed on. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take this mask, which is basically going to tell us between the white and black. And then out of the color, I'm going to do a bump height node and then plug that normal into here. And now you can see that this texture is kind of all messed up and weird. But if you drop this strength to like 0.2, and then let's invert it to where it's facing out and change this distance to like 0.2 or so, maybe even 0.1. Let's try 0.05. You can see it's kind of pixelated. The more you drop that, it gets a little bit better. But that's also still not very much bump. Let's try setting this to 0.5. Nice. That's a little bit of added detail. You can see that the when it hits the light, it's got a little bit of a refraction edge. We might could even drop this down to like 0.01. Yeah, that looks good. And then we might even increase this to 0.7. Nice. So for each of these keys, if you want to change the color, just grab it, go to the top hand view, make sure that you set it up as an instance of the material. And then for this one, I'm going to bring this up, give it an orange texture. I snuck in the Blender logo, so I'm just going to turn this up, give it an orange texture. Oops, see, I didn't make an instance, so it applied to all. So for this one, I'm going to go this. And then I'm also going to rename it just so I can remember which one is which. Blender. And then make this one like the record button or something. So now we can go through, look at our image. to see if there's any ones that are changed. This looks like this icon up here was a different color, so change it. Looks like a microphone to me. Go back to the shader editor, change this color. Also a cool little trick, if you have the image pulled up, I'm just gonna go to the image editor here and go top view. If you want to copy the color exactly, click your base color and then the eyedropper and click that. And now if we go back, set this to the viewport, you can see we kind of match that exact color. It doesn't work perfectly, so like what I would do is I would bump that value all the way up, and then that's gonna look pretty good. Okay, so now what we have is we have all the buttons applied. We're gonna do a very simple shader for these also. So I'm gonna grab the 4 pads here. We're just gonna make it the same rough white plastic, so Control L, link materials. We're gonna do the same thing for the speaker mesh, so grab this, Shift Select, Control L, link materials. Oh yeah, starting to come together. So now another detail we want to do is these buttons or these turn knobs. So I'm going to pull the image editor back up. So what we're going to do is we're going to select this, and then we're going to first of all give it the same material for the base pieces. So we're going to Control L, link materials. And now we got to do the same thing where we have a new material for this little top cap. So over here, I've already added one. So if you don't have this, just click the plus button and this slot will pop up here. So now what we want to do is we just want to make a new material. So go to shader, and we're going to click new. I'm going to call this knob 1. And then well, all we have to do now is I'm going to set this to the image editor. That way we can see the color on this. I'm going to take this base color, grab in the middle of this, and then go back to the shader, or we can just make this our shader editor. Nope, let's go back and make this the viewport. So now what I'm going to do is in this view over here, I'm going to tab, I'm going to click 3, grab this guy, Control plus down to here or so. And then all we need to do is, first of all, I got to go here to this slot and then make this that knob. So then I'm going to tab and just make sure I'm selected all this, and I'm just going to hit assign, and that's going to add this to it. So then we're going to drop the roughness down to give it some highlight. I'm going to boost the value a little bit. Actually, I kind of like it where it's at. And then for the texture, let's just do the same thing. Get rid of our image texture. Ooh. Add a noise. Change it from UV to object. Plug that factor into a bump height. Move everything over. Plug that into the normal. Crank the scale way up. Drop the strength to 0.1. And that's a little bit too shiny for me, so I'm going to drop this down, increase that scale even more. Nice. So then what I'm going to do is, to make this a little bit quicker, I'm just going to grab each of these little middle pieces, Control L, link materials, and then for each one, I'm just going to go into the second one, make a new instance of it, and then change this to knob 2. For this one, I'm going to change this to knob 3, and then for this one, change this to knob, oh, gotta make sure instance, knob 4. And then what I can do is I can just go back, make this my image viewer, grab this one, we're on knob 2, select this material, do this. I'm gonna go into rendered view over here so we can see. Tab, select this top, grab all these faces, and then assign this new color. Same thing with this one. Grab, Control plus. Grab the third texture, which we need to change to this color. Assign. Same thing here. Tab, Control plus. Grab everything. Change this to this really nice orange color. Hit assign. And there you have it. We are really coming along. You can adjust these if you want. Looks like this might be a little bit too shiny for me, but it actually looks pretty good. I'm going to leave it that way for now. I'm going to set this back to the solid view. Go into my 3D viewport here. And then I'm going to change this back to shader. Okay, now we basically set everything up. The last pieces that we have is this LCD screen. I'm going to use a different method to do this. You could go fancy and make a glass shader and then put a piece under it with emission, but what we're going to do is a little bit easier and quicker. So I'm just going to take this whole piece right here, tab into edit mode, A, U, project from view. You can see the topology is terrible in this, but for what we're doing, it doesn't really matter. And then we're gonna make a new material. We're gonna call it LCD for the screen. And then we're gonna actually use the node Wrangler again, Control T. And then we're gonna open from the top view. And we're just gonna use the actual LCD screen for this. So now you can see that it's got a texture on it, but it doesn't really look where it would need to be. So we need to go into our UV editor, and then we need to go tab into edit mode. That's going to show us where everything is. We're going to A, select everything, move it to the top, scale it down, basically to where it fits this texture. I'm going to try not to get the highlight on the edges. And then if you did this, it looks pretty good the way it is now, but we're going to cheat just a little bit, and I'm going to come up here and set the metallic a little bit higher. That's going to give it some reflective properties that I like. And then I'm also going to drop the roughness down to about 0.35. So now you get nice reflections from the light if you need that. This is not the most photorealistic way to do this, but it is pretty close. Okay, the last piece that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this piece over here looks good. So I'm going to go into the image editor. This is the exact same material, so I'm just going to grab this and then the rough plastic here, Control L, link materials. And that is it. I'm going to go up here, change the film to not be transparent so we can kind of see our background. But this is the final textured thing. You can go through and, like, for example, if you don't like how this looks, we can go to the shader editor, make sure that we're selected on our black plastic. I actually want this to be a little bit rougher. This is not supposed to be reflective. And then if you want to change the reflectiveness of your plastic, you can do that. Go back and forth between. But that is your fully textured model. Feel free to go through and change any of the textures that we have. You can see we have a really nice looking model here. You can change the colors of your metals if you want it to be a darker metal or a lighter metal. You can change the strength of your bump. But overall, this is the textured model. I'm also going to change this blender color to be orange just for fun. Crank the value up, bring it to orange. And then you can now change all the colors on here. You can change the saturation on any of these colors if you think they're kind of washed out. Throw the saturation up on each of them. This one is a very beige color, so we kind of leave that close. But if you want to change the saturation on this guy, it's pretty high. And that's it. So you can go through now. You can change all of your colors on your model. In the next video, we're going to be adding some lighting, some better photorealistic methods to photograph it. We can do some animation. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this whole file is going to be available on my Patreon. So if you want to go download that and join for free, feel free to do that. And then other than that, we'll see you in part 3 to do some product animation and rendering.